Okay, I'm sitting down here and now I'm getting ready to torque the main caps. You start in the center and you work your way out in an X pattern. And final torque on these bolts are 70 foot-pound, so I did it in 3 steps. Went 35, 55, and 70. But you do the center cap first, like this. Click, 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 and yeah, work your way out. Now you notice how I crossed from one bolt to the next, and then went down, and then see how I crossed again, and then we go back down. Then I'll do the next bolt closest to me. And when you do this, you want to keep a nice smooth push or pull. If you jerk or something like that, it'll cause it to, the clicky type torque wrench to give you a false reading. So you have to do it in a smooth turning fashion. But anyway, now we're all the way out to the outside. Now we'll readjust the wrench here, and we'll start in the center again and work our way out. You never want to just go to final torque. You always want to do it in steps. It's better that way. The book only said that it only gave you final torque specs, but it's better to do it in steps. You don't want to just tighten that down to that torque specification all at one time. You want to do it in a progressive sequence like this. Now right now I'm torquing these at 55 foot-pound. Notice and once you start doing this, you want to do it the same like you did at the first round. That means after you do the center cap, you want to go to the next cap like you did the first run through. And it doesn't matter which one you do next, as long as you keep that same pattern sequence the whole way through. Like if I'd have done the center one and then done the one towards the front of the block, it would have been okay. And then, but as long as you do it the same way, that way all the time, then you're alright. But, so now we're torquing all the bolts here at 55 foot-pounds. And like I said, always remember to do that cross. Like you'll see, you notice how you go to the bottom bolt there, the bolt closest to me, and then I'll do the bolt farthest away from me on the next cap. And you always want to do that because that'll give you an even torque. Okay. Now what we're doing is we're going to set up for final torque at 70 foot-pound. Like I said, on this engine here, final torque is 70 foot-pounds. Now if you'd have the 2.2 dual overhead cam engine, it's I think it's like 60 foot-pounds, and then you go 100 degrees, like you need a degree wheel to do it. So but this engine, you don't have to do that. It's just straight torque, just like you normally would do anything else. Okay, so now I set it, and what I'm doing at the back of the torque wrench, you turn the handle, and then that little knob in the back locks it, so that way it doesn't turn on you while you're torquing the bolts down. There we go. And after you do this, you should always spin the motor over and check it. Make sure it's not binding, it's spinning freely. like I said, the reason I'm sitting down doing this is because you have more control over the torque wrench than you would if you stood up. I feel you have a better feel for what you're doing if you sit down and do it. And that should be the last bolt for the main bearings. The rod bearings final torque is only 38 foot-pounds, so I did those in just 2. I started out at 25 and then I went to 38. So now what I want to do is turn the motor over to make sure the bearings feel nice. Make sure there's no binding or anything like that. Because if you didn't line the bearings up right, and if you had a bearing overlap or something, it'll be tight and hard to turn. You got to remember, it's still going to be a little stiff because you got your rods in and your connecting rods. You know, the pistons and the rings are still there, so that's going to give you some resistance. And then you have now I don't have the timing chain actually in yet, so I'm just spinning the crank freely. Like this isn't a zero tolerance engine, so the pistons won't smack a valve if it's open in this motor. So but I tried to turn it myself, but there's just too tight to be able to do that. So then I just gave it, and it right away it turned, so it's okay. And you want to make sure you go a couple revolutions to make sure it's not binding. And you always want to go to the direction that it normally spins. But it turned over with you know, the normal resistance of the rings on the cylinder wall. So okay, now the rod cap bolts are a 13 millimeter 12 point. You have to have a 12 point socket to tighten them. A 6 point won't work, but they are 13 millimeter. And like I said, final torque on the rod caps is 38 foot-pound. And you're going to see here, we'll show you here in a minute. Like I said, I turned down, I went down to 25 foot-pound first to start out with, and then after the 25 foot-pound, we jump it up to 38, which is final torque. Okay. Now the rods, you want to start from the center and work your way out, just like you do with the main bearing caps. But really, it doesn't matter. What matters is getting the right torque on the bolts. So like I said, I did these in 2 steps. I went 25 foot-pound at 2, and then final torque of 38. But like I said, you want to try to keep a smooth motion when you go to torque these, because like I said, if you do jerk the wrench, it will click before it should, and you won't have the right torque on the bolt then. But there we go. Okay. In this engine, they have what they call sister cylinders. 1 and 4 pistons are up top top dead center, and 2 and 3 are at top dead center at the same time. So that's how this engine's built. 1 and 4 are up, and 2 and 3 are up at the same time. But the firing order is still 1, 3, 4, 2. Like I said, you just want to make sure you do this nice and smooth, because now when you see me pause there and like I give the wrench another push, what I'm doing is I'm double checking the wrench, like to make sure that it snapped over at the torque that I set it for. Because if it snaps over and then you do it again and it snaps again and it makes a little click again, that means you're right where you're supposed to be and it's okay. And what I'm doing here is, after I did the initial torquing, I wanted to turn the motor over, make sure there was no binding, which there wasn't. So now we're going to go to final torque on the rod caps. This takes a little bit of time to do. It's not like it's, something that you can rush through. But, if you take your time, you can do it. I mean, it's not rocket science. It just takes a little bit of patience and a little bit of know-how. And the right tools, And this is pretty critical stuff. Like, you don't want to mess this up. If you do, you just wasted all the time and effort that you took to do it, because you rushed. But if you just take your time and do it step by step, you'll be fine. Now, this is number 4 rod here. The front of the engine, as you look at this, is on your right, and the rear of the engine, or the transmission side of the engine, is on the left on the screen. So, and that's number 1 rod there that I'm tightening now. Now, on this rod, something didn't feel right. So what I did is, it didn't snap over. Like, it just didn't feel right. So I backed it off. Okay, and then I to tighten it up. And once it clicked, because you remember, you're putting almost 40 foot-pound of torque on these bolts. I mean, that's a decent amount of torque. But if there's anywhere where you want to make sure you use a book and do it to the specifications, this is about the most important place in the entire engine, other than the head bolts, is where you want to make sure you use a torque wrench, because if you put this together wrong, it's coming apart. If they're too tight, there's not enough clearance for oil. Now, if you notice this, I turn this here, and honestly, I know it looks like it's taking a lot of effort, but really it's turning over like it should. So it's really where it should be. Now what I'm going to do is, now that I know that the crank is okay and everything, now it's time to put in the timing chain and get the motor engine in time. Sorry the camera angle isn't real good for this, but I tried to, there we go, I readjust here, but still kind of hard to see. So take off the front pulley. Now the first thing to go on here is the lower gear, okay? And the lower gear goes on one direction. There's actually a hump in the back of the lower gear, and that goes towards the crank. And on the outside there's a dot. That dot is actually your timing mark. And on this engine, the tensioner for the timing chain is where you line your timing marks up at. So what you do is after I get the gear on, then we'll put it in time. You'll see me do that here. Just cleaning the gear off, making sure it's clean of oil and stuff. I want to be able to see it good. Now, okay, like I said, you got to make sure you put it the right way. And there, like I said, there's a little hump in the back of that, and it rides up, and that's what stops it against the crank, and that's what positions it. That's what it's for. So now what I'm going to do is just get a hammer and slightly start to tap it, and then I have I actually have a seal driver set, and or not a seal driver set, but a ball joint press, and I used one of the sleeves out of the ball joint press to tap this gear on. And it doesn't take much to slide the gear on. You just hit it, and you don't have to hit it real hard. It'll go. Yeah, you know. Because you want to remember, you don't want to hit it too hard, because you don't want to ruin the thrust bearing in the block. That absorbs all the shock. By right, I wish I had a dowel or a what is it? Dowel caliper? No. I should check the end play, but I don't have the right the tool to do it. But anyway, now this is just a matter of tapping this on. There's really no other way to put it on the crank. What I could have done was, before I put the crank in the engine, I could have put this gear on, which is really what I should have done, but I kind of got ahead of myself. So right there it is, out of my ball joint press, so this won't hurt. Like I said, it doesn't take much. I'm not really hitting. If you notice, I'm not taking big swings of the hammer. You don't have to. Once it gets started, it'll goes on pretty easily. And like I said, you don't got to take big giant swings. I'm not even hardly swinging that hammer. So, and as you can see, it's going on. Okay, and that should be close, a little bit more. Like I said, there's actually a on the end of the crank, there's a machined ledge. It sits right up against that, so. And there's a keyway on the end of the crank, so it keeps everything lined up. And there, it's on. Now, looking for the timing mark is what I'm looking for. There's just a little dot divot on the gear. See, that's what I'm doing now. Okay, with the light there, you can get a better picture of that. The white parts there are actually where the timing chain ride against. And here I'm attempting to try to turn the crank to get it in where it needs to be, but that's not going to work. So I put the pulley back on, and that's got a keyway. That's slotted for the keyway also. And then what I'll do is I'll turn it until, you'll see here, I'll turn it until the timing mark is lined up. There's, like I said, on the tensioner, there's two pieces of metal that are rolled over, and that's your timing mark tabs. And there's just two little metal tits that stick out, and you line the bottom gear has a dot on it. The top gear, the cam gear, actually has a hole drilled, and you line the tooth with the hole drilled in it up with the tang, and the bottom gear, the crank gear, has a divot on the tooth that lines up with that, and that's how you put it in time. This takes a little bit of time. Like I said, you just gotta use a little bit of patience, but you gotta turn it till you get it, close. You don't want to go too far with this. And like I said, I'm just double checking myself. Because you want to make sure when you put this in time, you want to get this right. That way you don't have to tear it back apart once you put it in the car. And if you did this right, it'll start right up on the first turn. This takes some finagling, just a little bit of. It's pretty close. I can tell from looking here. It's almost, like I said, it takes a little bit of time messing around, but it'll be close. Okay, now I've got the dot lined up where it needs to be. Now the next thing I got to do is get the cam in line where it's got to go, and the cam's hard to turn. You figure you got let's see, 4 cylinders, 2 valves per cylinder, 8 springs up on top there, and they got some pressure, and the cam's a little trickier to line up than the crank, but once you get it lined up, it's pretty easy. You'll see here in a second. I'm just looking at the cam gear here, trying to see what marks go where, and okay, there we go. I'll put the cam gear on. Okay, and that's the nut, the bolt that holds the cam gear on. Now here I just tried to turn it, but with all that spring pressure it would just pop back where it was at. So you'll see here in a second I had to get the what I did is I had to get a socket and a breaker bar and turn the cam, because there was no way to turn it to keep it where it needed to be. So this is meticulous. Like I said, this is what takes the time. But once you do all this, when you sit this engine back in the car, if you do all this here now, you can pretty much just set the motor in and don't have to worry. It should start on the first try if you've done everything correctly. Here I am getting a socket to fit the cam gear nut, and there it is. I believe that is a 24 millimeter. It's a gigantic socket. Yeah, I'm almost positive it's 24 millimeter, and that's what you're going to need for the cam, the bolt on the cam. There we go, turn the cam. once you get the cam lined up, there's an actual hole drilled right through the cam sprocket, and that's your timing mark on the camshaft. Here I am trying to remove the bolt because I didn't want it to turn, but yet, you know, I needed that bolt back off because I had to take the gear off so I could put the chain on. And a little bit of elbow grease, a little bit of know-how, and it's hard to hold that. There we go, it's loose. If I'd have had my air gun hooked up, that would have never happened. It'd have come right off. But I wasn't using any air tools to put this together, reassemble this. I like to do this by hand. Air tools, sometimes you get a little crazy, and if you're not, you know, paying attention or whatever, it'll end up biting you in the end. But okay, now take the gear back off because you have to be able to take that gear off to get this right. Now, the edge that's closest to the camera, or to the bottom of the screen, that's the tight edge. And the other one, the end of the side of the chain closest to where I'm at, that's the tension side of the chain. The front side is actually the tight side, and then the back side is where the tensioner pushes against the chain. And so you want to make sure that front edge is tight before, and you put your when you put your gear and stuff on. And as long as you got that front edge tight, and you'll line up the peg on the cam, and it'll go right on. As long as you got the timing marks put where they're supposed to be, it'll go right in. It'll only go on one way, just like that. Now, in the tensioner, I have the tensioner, which is closest to my arm right there, my right arm, I have a pop rivet keeping that held up. And all you do then, after you're done, you just take a pair of pliers and just pull it out, and it'll put the tension on the chain for you. I tried to remove it with my hand, but I couldn't get it. So I got a pair of, you'll see here. Okay. The engine's turning freely. And that's what I'm checking for. I want to make sure there's no binding. So what you do is you want to make sure you go around a few times, because if it's binding up, then it could be out of time. You know, it could be hitting, you know, you could have a problem with a valve hitting a piston. But there, I put the timing mark back where it was at. But you always want to make sure and double check once you put it in time. You want to turn the engine over a few times, because you want to make sure there's no binding. And like I said, that turned over like it should have. You know, with the resistance in the there. Now there's where I removed the pop rivet I had that was holding the tensioner. But like I said, you always want to turn that engine over a few turns, because you want to make sure that there's no binding or anything like that into the engine. Now, right now I'm taking all the screws out for the I'm taking all the timing cover screws out. I put those back in the block because this way here I don't lose them. But pretty much now all that there's left to do here, as you're going to see, is I'm going to put the timing cover on. And that's pretty easy. It's got two pins to locate it, and then once you got it sitting on those locating pins, it'll stay. And I believe those bolts are 8mm. Yeah, timing cover bolts are 8mm. And hold on one second here, I'm getting that. Actually, I'm getting the cover is what I'm doing, but and the socket and the ratchet. And these bolts don't need to be extremely tight. The gasket that goes in there is a preformed gasket. There's a channel actually machined into the housing, and it's a rubber gasket that fits in there. So you just tighten it up just till the gasket moves a little bit, and then it'll seal. It's a good gasket system. But now here we go. There's the cover. And now the cover's got a new seal in the front where the front pulley goes. It's got, when I tore this apart initially inside the car, we just thought it was the timing chain, the tensioner went. So we bought a brand new tensioner. You can do that inside the car. And the gasket kit comes with a new front cover gasket, the new harmonic balancer seal, and and then the oil pan gasket was separate. But once you got, like I said, once you got that on there, it's pretty easy. Now, I'm not sure why I took this back off. I have to look here for a second. That's what it was. It was greasy. I wanted to wipe it off. A little bit greasy. But now what I wanted to do was just make sure that that bolt on the crank or the camshaft gear is tight. I don't want it coming loose. So just making sure here. I don't want to, put it together and then not make sure that's not tight. I just want to make sure it's snug. Yeah. Doesn't hurt to double check yourself, so that's what I was doing. But anyway, now here comes the timing cover. Like I said, it goes on real easy. There's 2 pins in the block, in the front of the block, that line up with two holes, and you always put that outside pin on first, the one closest to the camera. You want to put that one on first because that's how there it goes, and then it pops right on and it'll stay. And now you got to run your bolts in. I believe there's, wait, let me see, I think there's 6. 1, yeah, I believe there's 6 bolts in the timing cover. Yeah, 6. And like I said, those are 8mm fasteners. So you don't need to go crazy on tightening them down. I use a 1/4-inch drive ratchet because, there's no need to crank down on them. It's an aluminum cover. And if you tighten them up too much, you'll crack that cover. Like I said, the way that gasket's made, the one that goes inside the cover, you just want it so it just moves the gasket a little bit, and then that's it. Here I am just wiping off some of the excess grease that's on the front of the timing cover. Okay, now I'm getting ready to tighten up the bolts. Here's where I made a dummy. I was going to put the harmonic balancer shaft in before I tightened up the timing cover, and I ended up having to take it back off. But You'll see what this looks like here. Now the pulley for the serpentine belt unbolts from that snub that I have right there. Okay, there it goes. Now you do not want to beat the slop out of this. I just tapped it a little bit, just enough to get it started. You really don't want to pound this on. Like I said, the more pounding against the crank you do, the worse it is for the thrust bearing. So it's not a good idea to, beat the slop out of this. But you got to make sure you get it on enough that you can get the bolt. Now you'll see what I'm going to do here in a minute. Okay. Now what you do, the right way to do this, you put the bolt in with the washer, and then you use a socket, and it'll draw it right in to where you need it. Okay, now when I got the Reman crankshaft, it came with a new crank end bolt, and that end bolt was actually 7/8 compared to the old. I believe it was 19 or 21 millimeter in the original. So I used the new bolt because they provided it with the crank, so you should use it. So, but yeah, I believe it was 7/8. But the original one's 21 millimeter, I believe. I'm getting some tools, getting stuff together here. Okay, 1/2 inch. Now what I'm going to do here is, if you watch, it'll draw it right in. I take a pry bar and the counterweight on the crankshaft, wedge it between the block and the crank, and it doesn't hurt it. All you're doing is holding it from turning. But now this, you'll see, this will go right in real nice and easy. If I'd had my air gun hooked up, it wouldn't even need to hold the engine. It would have pushed it right on. But I'm doing it by hand, so. But look how easy this goes in. It just, like I said, it just slid on the end of that snout. So it doesn't take much pressure to do this. Just. And you want to stop. You want to stop pushing that in. You want to push it till it just touches the seal on the wear marks. You look where the wear mark is, and you want to just tap it in, or turn it in till it touches that. And you don't want to go any farther, because if you go too far, where it's worn on that snout, it'll cause that front timing cover seal to leak. So you don't want to do that. And I should have used a shallow socket. I do not know why I grabbed the deep well, but oh well. It worked. I'm going to take it back off so I can put the pulley on. And then you'll see me put the pulley on, and then I end up taking the pulley back off because I forgot to tighten the timing cover bolts up. Kind of got ahead of myself, and that's happened sometimes. You'll see here where I mess up. Now the 3 bolts to hold the pulley onto the balancer right there, those are 15 millimeter bolts. There's 3 of those. Yep, those are all 15 millimeter. I spin this on, and then I realize my mistake, so I take it off. Get the 8 millimeter, and here's where I start to tighten these up. Like I said, you don't need to put a lot of torque on these. Just snug them till the gasket starts to move a little bit, and that's all you need to do. It'll seal the way that gasket's made. It's, it'll seal right up. Like I said, that's why you don't need no big Jagunda wrench. Just use a 1/4-inch drive and it'll put it right in there. So I'm tightening these up. Now the only thing I haven't done to the engine yet, I have to put the oil pump back on, and I have to, after the oil pump, I have to put the oil pan back on. I did put the rear main seal in, but I didn't record it. And once I take it off the engine stand, I'll have to put the flywheel on. And I'll tell you what the torque specs are for the flywheel bolts when I go to put them on. Okay, now, like I said, no. Okay, here comes the lower pulley and the 315mm fasteners, plus then the that bolt in the end of the crank. And like I said, these are all 15mm. You don't really need to torque them, just tighten them up till they're snug, but don't overdo it. You just need to snug these, because like I said, you got those 3 fasteners to hold it on, and then plus you got the center bolt that goes into the crank that will help hold that on also. So it's not going to go anywhere. Really, those 3 bolts are just to keep that pulley from spinning. Just snug them up. There you go. Now we're going to grab our center bolt and put that in with the washer. Okay. And like I said, the new bolt that came with the crank was 7/8. Oops. Slippery fingers. Darn thing trying to hide from me. But I hope this video is helpful, because there's a lot of steps in doing this, but I just wanted to do the video right, and hope to teach somebody something. Once this is tightened up, I'm done. Like I said, the oil pan and the oil pump are actually I'll put those on tomorrow, but I might make a video. I'm not sure if I'm going to or not, but it's pretty much done and ready to go now. And here I am, just making sure now that I got everything together how it turns over, and it nice and easy like it should, just like the way it should. The spark plugs aren't in it, so there's no compression, but you have spring pressure from the cam, and then you got resistance from the rings going up and down the cylinder walls. But like I said, you want to do this several times to make sure there's no binding. It doesn't, you want to make sure it doesn't feel like it's going to bind up. Because if it binds up, then you got a problem. And as you can see, there's no binding in this at all. So, but that's pretty much all there is to doing this. Like I said here, I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it's a little bit long, but I wanted to be able to show you exactly how to do this the right way. This is how I was taught to do it, so everybody's got their way of doing things, and this is just like, I don't like doing anything on the bottom end with air tools. I just like doing it by hand. So, but well, I hope you liked the video. Please rate, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Next thing I should be showing you is probably going to be putting it in, setting the motor back in the car. But before I do that, I'm actually going to replace the oil sending unit. It's going to be a lot easier to replace it since the block's out of the car. So we're going to do that, and that'll be it. So, like I said, thank you, and we'll see you in the next one.